Yao to Mao by The Great Courses and Kenneth J. Hammond. This is technically a lecture series, not a book, but I am counting it as a book because when I listen to this, it is an identical experience to listening to a book about the history of China with 36 chapters. So I'm counting it. This goes through the complete history of China from Yao, one of the first thinkers in China, to Mao. And it is exactly what I always wanted to know about Chinese history. Good, solid overview of all the dynasties, the main events that happened, and what generally was going on in the thousands of years that encompass Chinese history. Fun fact, this didn't come from this lecture series, but one way you can remember the Chinese dynasties is through the song Frere Jacques. Shengzhou Qin Han, Shengzhou Qin Han, Sui Tang Song, Wan Ming Qing Republic, Wan Ming Qing Republic, Mao Zedong, Mao Zedong. And it was great going into this lecture series with that little song in my head because I could go through each of the dynasties and give it some context of how it fit into Chinese history. Listening to this all together was a great lesson in why dynasties rise and fall. It's fascinating how regularly it happens. You just give a very prosperous dynasty 100 or 200 years and then they're overthrown by peasant revolt.
Help! Help! I'm being repressed! Bloody peasant! Oh.
Constant good governance basically just seems impossible listening to the history of China. One dynasty that I thought was particularly noteworthy is how the Ming dynasty fell, because China was discovering a lot of the world in the early 1400s, and then they gave up on it and they got rid of their ships, and it was a very fierce infighting. One thing that this lecture series brings up that stood out to me was the debate became not about the issues, but it came about the morality of the opposing side. Each side was convinced that the other person was not just wrong, but they were evil, like morally inferior. So when you think your opponent is evil, you don't have an incentive to compromise with them, to discuss with them. They're bad and they need to be eliminated. And both sides being preoccupied with that is what led to the downfall of the Ming dynasty, which I thought was telling to human nature and the nature of government itself, and a good cautionary tale. Anyway, the lecture series was great. A solid recommendation if Chinese history is a mystery. 4 out of 5 stars. If you have any recommendations, leave them in the comments below.